Welcome into another edition of the Sports Hub Patriots podcast training camp shows from day 10 of training camp. I'm Alex Barth from 985thesportshub.com, and joining us to recap day 10 is Zack Cox. He covers the Patriots for NESN. Zack, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Alex, thanks for having me. This is a nice summer tradition that's been going on for the last couple of years, so happy to be here.
Glad to have you back, and definitely a lot to talk about today because after a day off, the Patriots came back, and Matthew Judon came back after getting that contract reworked, his first full practice of the summer, and he was a presence, had a sack right away. He was in the backfield all day. What'd you make of his performance? Are you surprised that there was no rust after he kind of just sat out the first week and a half?
Yeah, he really looked like Matthew Judon out there. I think I had him down for 3, like, quote-unquote sacks. It's always hard to tell what exactly are sacks in practices like this, but yeah, he came out there. He was energized. He was in the backfield a lot. He was a highly disruptive presence for the Patriots offensive line to deal with. It certainly helped that he was going up against an offensive line that was down 4 of their 5 starters. So that definitely was a factor there. But yeah, it did not seem to be, he did not seem to have any kind of ill effects from the workload that he's had over these last 2 weeks. He looked very much like the Matthew Judon that we're used to seeing.
When he was asked after practice if the contract being done means that he's, done going to the lower fields, he's done being limited, if he's going to be full go. And he sort of talked around it. He didn't give a definitive answer. He said, if the coaches want me practicing, I'll practice. If the coaches want me on the lower field, I'll be on the lower field. Do you think, we're seeing them do workload management with crucial players, Trent Brown, Ramondre Stevenson. Do you think there is still a chance that he's limited from day to day and he could be one of these guys that's in that workload program?
I wouldn't rule it out. The fact that the Patriots have been doing it with Ramondre Stevenson this summer tells me that it's not exclusively a contract issue type thing. It might be a contract issue with Trent Brown, but with Ramondre Stevenson, he's legally, by NFL rules, not allowed to get a contract adjustment, extension, anything like that until next offseason. So that seems to be purely a workload management situation for him. You know how important Matthew Judon is to the Patriots defense. He's also a player who's kind of worn down a little bit by the end of each of the last 2 seasons. Maybe even with this contract situation behind him, it still wouldn't shock me if the Patriots say, I don't know, every 3rd or 4th practice, you just kind of dial back. You don't really need to be out there. Just go run some sprints, do a little agility, maybe be in there for some walkthrough periods. He's definitely not a guy who needs to be out there in every 11-on-11 snap. So I think it would probably be wise for the Patriots, now that they have shown a little bit more of a willingness to take that approach, to just sort of dial things back for him a little bit, maybe not play him at all in the preseason, maybe very little. But you don't want a worn down Matthew Judon, even now that the contract situation is kind of out of the picture.
I think you nailed it talking about the end of these seasons, right? The last 2 years, he's kind of fallen off. And if you don't need him as full go in August, right? And if that maybe factors in. So it's just so much was made of that being contract related at the time. And ultimately it seems like that ended up at least partially being the case. But I also wouldn't be surprised if we see him back down there at some point. And then, I'm sure somebody will try to spin it as he's not happy with the deal he ultimately got. But if they're going to workload manage anybody on this roster, it feels like Judon would be the guy. Like Judon and Stevenson would be the two, I think, go hand in hand just after the way last season went.
Yeah, you're talking about the kind of irreplaceable players on both sides of the ball at the moment. On offense, with what they have behind Stevenson at running back, you can't afford to lose him. On defense, Judon has been far and away their best defensive player over the last couple of years. So players like that, and players also, especially with the way that the Patriots defense is this year, basically their entire front 7 is back from last year. All of their coaches are back. It's not like they're kind of installing a completely new defense and Matthew Judon needs to be in there to work through it and get adjusted to it. He knows what he's doing. He knows the players around him. So the benefit of him being out there for practice is, I would say, lesser this year than it has been in previous years.
And with Judon back today, best day, I thought, for the defense so far this summer. 4 interceptions, handful of pass breakups, like you said, a number of sacks. But this is kind of becoming the questions of this training camp. The Patriots are down 4 offensive line starters today. Obviously, Onwenu's still on PUP. Cole Strange is still out. Trent Brown's still limited. And then David Andrews didn't practice. Seemed like a veteran's day off. Him, Jonathan Jones, Matthew Slater, all not there. But you're essentially working in front of a backup offensive line. So I think today, and also big picture, how much stock have you been able to put in what we've seen from the defense and the defensive front, given who they've gone against so far in camp?
I think the defense is going to be fine. I'll be interested to see how it looks once you see how they do in a preseason game, or especially these joint practices are going to be really instructive, I think. But I think it's a bigger concern just about the Patriots offense and the state of this offensive line. I think if they have that preferred top starting five healthy and available, I think they're in pretty good shape. It's not the best offensive line in the NFL by any means, but if you can roll out Trent Brown, Cole Strange, Andrews, Onwenu, and then probably Connor McDermott, somebody at right tackle, I think they're in okay shape. But we haven't seen that group at all this summer because Onwenu hasn't practiced yet. And we haven't even seen close to that group at all because Cole Strange has been out for almost a week now. Trent Brown has been at almost every practice, but not really doing much. And then, as you mentioned, now no David Andrews today. It's been a lot of reps for the young guys, a lot of reps for the backups, but this offensive line, it's just such a large question mark for Bill O'Brien and for this whole offensive unit, because you can have improved play calling, you can have improved skill guys, but if you can't protect the quarterback, then you can't do much of anything. So I think that's the single biggest kind of X factor for this offense right now.
I think some of it too with that group, at least as you look at it moving forward, like you said, if they get all five guys, they'll be fine. And I think they're, Trent Brown, he's limited. He looks healthy. He'll be back. David Andrews, day off. He'll be back. Even Cole Strange, he tweaked his knee, but there was a report right away. It wasn't a big deal. And he's been back out at practice. He hasn't done anything, but he's been out there. Mike Onwenu's kind of the guy. He's been on PUP. He had that offseason ankle surgery, but he's a big part of this. Might be their best offensive lineman. At what point, where's the point where you start to get worried with him? Because obviously there's still over a month until they play their first game. But at what point do we start worrying about him maybe missing time?
I'd probably give it another week or two. It does look like we've seen some progress from him within the last 4 or 5 days. We've spotted him kind of down on the rehab field doing some, at least being out there doing some movements, doing some kind of sprints and work with the strength staff. So it does seem to be, it appears that he's on the proper trajectory there. But even when that injury was first reported, I don't believe there was ever a kind of concrete timetable put on it after he underwent that off-season ankle surgery. So, I mean, it could be a case where it stretches into the regular season. If that is the case, you'll probably see maybe Antonio Mafi in at right guard there, maybe Cody Russi. It seems like Bill Murray has kind of fallen out of favor since the pads have come back on, but there's not a lot of proven depth really at any of those three interior spots. I think if you can get that top three, especially on the interior, the Patriots are in really good shape, assuming Cole Strange takes a bit of a step forward in this second season, which I expect him to do. But yeah, if you lose Onwenu, I agree with you. They're the Patriots' best offensive lineman. Losing him is going to be a big void to fill if that is the case. But again, I think we still a little bit early to worry about whether he might not be out there in week one.
Again, we're talking to Zack Cox of NESN. The other big story today, it's sort of big. I guess it depends how you want to look at it. So early in practice, the Patriots split up to just run some routes against air. They're working on route combinations, and one group is with Mac Jones, the other group's with Bailey Zappi and Trace McSorley. And who you'd expect was with Mac. Who you'd expect would be with the backups was with the backups, except Demario Douglas was in the top group. Tyquan Thornton was in the second group. Then we get into team drills. They were both repping with the ones. Do you see this turning into a true battle competition for that fourth wide receiver spot? Because that's what it's starting to look like.
It is. I mean, I think I put more stock in Thornton being with that second group than I do of Douglas being with the first group, just because Douglas has been in that first group basically throughout camp. Even though most of his competitive reps have come with Bailey Zappi and Trace McSorley, he's gotten work with Mac Jones pretty much, I believe, every single training camp practice so far. When they do that split with the kind of the roster hopefuls on one side and the regulars on the other side, he has always been in that regular group. So I didn't view that as a big change, but Tyquan Thornton had also always been in that regular group until today. He missed a couple days of practice this week. He was back out there full participant today, but was running with guys like Malik Cunningham and Keshawn Boobie and Trey Nixon rather than Devontae Parker and Juju Smith-Schuster and Kendrick Bourne. If from a kind of wide receiver hierarchy standpoint, it does seem like Demario Douglas is above Tyquan Thornton at the moment. I think I would be very surprised if Tyquan Thornton doesn't make the roster just because he was a second round draft pick last year. That would be a pretty sizable kind of roster decision. And it was just one day after he was coming back from a multi-day absence. But this, if you're talking about the most disappointing players in camp so far, I think Tyquan Thornton has to be pretty high up on that list, just because we really haven't seen him do much of anything of substance with that top offense. I don't believe he has a single catch in 7-on-7s or 11-on-11s from Mac Jones in any training camp practice. And then couple that with what we saw out there today from a personnel standpoint. And he certainly seems to be trending in the wrong direction, which obviously is not what you want to see from a guy who had in my opinion, pretty uninspiring rookie year last year.
And even his day today was weird. He caught a deep ball early from Bailey Zappi, got separation from Isaiah Bolden and Adrian Phillips, but then the big knock on him has been physicality. And there's 2 plays where he got deep balls, and on one play it was Joshua Bledsoe, on another play it was Rodney Randall. Guys just hit him, and he couldn't hold on to the ball. So it was, I thought that skill set that that one specific skill he probably needs to show in excess in this camp to win his way back in, I thought let him down today.
Yeah, I believe charting the pass breakups at practice today, I think the defense had 5 pass breakups and 3 of them were on passes to Tyquan Thornton. It was not a good day for, as you mentioned, that kind of physicality at the catch point, which has never really been his strength. But, I mean, unsurprisingly, looking at him, he's not a guy that has a lot of bulk and a lot of kind of size to overpower defenders. It just really has been a disappointing summer overall for Thornton. He'll have plenty of time still to kind of climb back into that first team mix, especially in those joint practices and the preseason games. But he has not done a lot to help himself out so far.
And so to get back, to that spot, he's got to get past Demario Douglas. I know you did kind of a deep dig on him on NESN.com. What have you made of Douglas so far this summer?
I mean, he's been awesome. He's been, I know we all do the kind of training camp takeaways, observations from every practice. And I think I've written about Douglas in every single one. It's kind of hard not to, just the way that he's performed really in every facet. I mean, his route running looks great. He looks a lot stronger than you would expect for a guy his size. His hands have been good. He's been good as a blocker. He's been really elusive with the ball in his hands. You've seen him used on kick returns, on punt returns, and then obviously the personnel angle that we talked about before, where he is getting so much work with that top offensive unit. It's almost sort of the opposite of Tyquan Thornton, who has not helped himself much. Demario Douglas, it seems like he helps himself from a roster perspective every time he comes out on the football field. It was interesting talking with Troy Brown the other day, who kind of went out of his way to sort of downplay the Demario Douglas hype train, saying, look, he's a rookie. He's only been out there for a couple of practices. He hasn't played in a real game yet. Let's kind of pump the brakes, which is a valid point there. We have seen plenty of players in the past who kind of flash early in camp and then sort of fade and aren't much of a factor down the line. But it's hard not to be impressed with everything he's been able to do so far, especially for a 6th round rookie to kind of come in as seamlessly as he has.
And then the other rookie receiver, Keshawn Boobie, made another touchdown catch today. He's kind of come on later. I almost feel like he's gotten pushed under the radar a little bit because Douglas was first, like the first of the rookies to emerge. But as we talk about Thornton and his standing and how things could change, do you think Boobie could also put himself in that conversation and potentially push Thornton to like that 6th spot?
He's definitely on the rise. He admitted last week when we talked to him, Boobie did, that he started off slowly. He really wasn't much of a factor in the spring. And then even in the first 5-6 days of camp, you didn't see much from him. He just wasn't really very involved. But today was now the 3rd straight practice, or the 3rd straight competitive practice, at least, where he's made a play that makes you go, oh, wow, okay, this guy's there. Today it was a touchdown catch from Bailey Zappi in the back of the end zone. Really nice contested catch, out-muscled Isaiah Bolden, rookie cornerback, in the back of the end zone. He's been seeing some reps with Mac Jones and that first-team offense in each of the last 3 practices. Not many reps. He definitely seems to be the kind of 6th guy on that hierarchy at the moment, but it's higher than he was at the start of camp, and he's someone who is now beginning to make the most out of some of his opportunities. And just from a pure talent potential standpoint, I mean, this was a guy who was a 5-star recruit, who was the number 2 receiver recruit in the entire nation just a couple of years ago. And if he'd gone into the draft after his 2nd year at LSU, he's probably a guy who's getting picked in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd round. Obviously, things didn't go well for him last year and during the pre-draft process, but he has, I don't want to hype him up too much because it's only been a couple of practices, and I still think I would probably still call him a roster long shot at this point. But this is a guy who has kind of steal of the draft potential if he puts everything together. So it's definitely been encouraging to see him start moving in that direction in the last couple of days.
He's going to be an interesting one because when you talk about that potential, and you laid it out perfectly there, the college background of being a top recruit, if he pops in the preseason, I think teams are going to get drooling because he does have that pedigree. And if he does become available, if he's good enough to stick around, you kind of have to, I feel like, put him on the roster, because even if he flashes a little bit, he's going to be a tough guy, tougher than your average 6th-round receiver, I think, to get to the practice squad. So if he really continues to build on this, I think they're going to have a really tough choice to make when it comes to him, because they're definitely keeping at least 4 receivers in Bourne, Smith-Schuster, Parker, and then Thornton's not going anywhere, like you said, even if he has a rough camp as a recent 50th overall pick. Seems like Douglas is going to make the team. And then if Boobie looks promising, he's going to be a hard guy to even waive, because, again, I think he's going to be a guy that's going to get some attention when it comes to that waiver process.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how that whole process plays out if he's not good enough to be a kind of no-brainer roster lock type player, but is in that mix and has a good enough preseason. It'll be interesting to see how other teams view him now at this point, because I know there were teams that just weren't even considering him in the draft based on some of the coachability issues and whatnot that came out of his time at LSU. But yeah, if he comes out and has a half decent preseason, you would imagine that there'll be some other teams that would say, hey, yeah, let's give him a waiver claim, just kind of take a shot on him. Why not? See what happens. I think probably the most likely turnout is he has a injury of some sort in week 3 of the preseason, lands on injured reserve, and then is kind of a red shirt type guy. But we'll see. Maybe he plays well enough in these next couple of weeks that he becomes a legitimate kind of roster type candidate.
He's definitely somebody I've heard the term Foxborough flu used with quite a bit, but it's going to be really fascinating to kind of follow him here the next couple of weeks. So we kind of talked about, we've hit on all the individual positions offensively, but we kind of hit the reset button here with the day off yesterday, a chance to look big picture. Bill O'Brien also spoke on Friday. It's been hard. Like, I've caught myself a lot this summer being, compared to last year, this, compared to last year, that. And I feel like this was a good chance to get away from that and sort of just evaluate this group on its own. Where are you at with this offense at this point compared to maybe what your expectations were?
Yeah, it's so difficult, right? Because you naturally compare everything to what you just saw, what you saw last season. And that was such a low bar that it's been very easy to basically look at anything the Patriots have done offensively and say, well, that's an improvement. That's a move in the right direction.
Hey, they lined up right. Better.
Yeah, basically. It was, I think it was Mike Gesicki said after a practice last week, he's like, yeah, we've been really disciplined. Like, there haven't been many false starts. There haven't been many kind of alignment errors, that sort of thing. And you think about it and you're like, yeah, that for most teams, that wouldn't be a kind of point of pride. But for what we saw last season, it's been markedly better in basically every area. The question is, and I mean, the question you just asked is how much better and how much of a difference is that improvement going to make? I don't know. That's really going to be, I think, what decides this Patriots season. I think they're in a pretty good spot right now. Bill O'Brien seems to really be doing everything that the Patriots would hope that he would do in kind of remaking this offense. The players all seem to love him. He seems to be kind of putting everything back on the proper track from a schematic standpoint and a game planning standpoint. The offensive line, in my mind, is still a major question there. Still some concerns about the depth, especially at running back behind Ramondre Stevenson, and whether this receiving core can kind of carry the team without a kind of no-brainer number one Pro Bowl type target in there that basically every one of the elite challenging teams in the NFL has. So there's plenty of questions for this group still, and they're going to have to answer those in the coming weeks. But I don't know. I think it's hard to not feel good about where they are at this point. But again, the bar was so low that it doesn't really take much to be better than what they had last year.
All right, Zach, as we wrap it up here, 2 more practices to go this week, Monday and Tuesday, and then the preseason opener on Thursday. What are you looking for between now and that first preseason game?
I want to see, just kind of continuation of what we've seen in these last couple of weeks. I really view that first preseason game as kind of a reset. You watch these final two practices, you watch the first preseason game, and I think some things emerge in that game that sort of refocuses your kind of attention for the rest of the preseason, whether that's who ends up playing in that game, someone lower on the depth chart flashes that you have to pay a little bit more attention to, somebody that you assumed was a roster lock that ends up playing 3/4 in that game. You have to say, maybe he's not as secure as you might have thought. So I think things kind of recontextualize a little bit after that game. And it'll be nice too. At this point in training camp, it gets you start to feel like you're talking about the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So it'll be good to get a little bit of the reset. And then you go into the joint practices for the next 2 weeks. And it's going to be a very different feel to Patriots camp kind of post preseason opener than it has been in these last couple of weeks. It's going to be fun.
There definitely is a level of repetition, like you said, that comes with it. And that's why, to go back to what you said off the top, it's so great doing this podcast every summer and getting all the writers on to get all the different perspectives. It keeps it fresh. So, Zach, thanks for taking your turn this summer. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. He is Zack Cox. You can read him at NESN.com. Follow him on Twitter at Zack Cox NESN. I'm Alex Barth, 985sportshub.com. I'll be back with another show tomorrow from the Patriots 11th practice. But, Zach, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
And for everybody tuning in, we'll talk to you next time.